Hi, Connect Groups. We're back for another edition of our Connect Group videos. And today we're in Luke chapter 2 looking at Mary. We're coming out of Mother's Day, and so thankful to my wife, Glorianne, for joining me on the platform and having that interaction. It was a lot of fun, and from the reports I got, it was fruitful. So we're excited and happy to continue the conversation in group. Luke chapter 2, Mary treasures all these things and ponders them in her heart. That's verse 19. And as she kind of understands in part, she begins to live by faith. So if I have a big idea that applies to everybody, it's that pondering prepares us to live by faith. Mary had to endure watching her son be tortured and accused and insulted, and many, even her immediate family, her own natural children, reject her son, Jesus. So she, by faith, continued to believe that he was the Son of God, that the identity that Christ was portraying in the world, projecting in the world, was going to finally come to a fulfillment, although under the circumstances, you can imagine how this would have been difficult to watch, and the scriptures never say it. But if Mary did have doubts, I would certainly understand. Rather, it seems that she continues to believe. She shows up at the cross. She shows up certainly to see the resurrected results of the resurrection on the day of Pentecost. She was there as part of the upper room crowd in the book of Acts. So a very exciting woman, a very exciting mother, and she encounters Jesus in somewhat of a strange situation at age 12, where he decides to be about the Father's business by staying at the temple and debating and discussing the scriptures with the elders, while the family left the temple area to go home after the celebration. So in Luke chapter 2, verse 41, we see that there's a question and answer that goes back and forth in verse 48 and 49. After Jesus answers in verse 50, the scriptures say, "And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them." That's meaning the parents, Joseph and Mary. Verse 51, "And they went down with them," and he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them, and his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So moms, I guess we probably all want our kids to be as submissive as Jesus. And even though he was able to share his own view, which of course as the Lord was correct, and in our children sometimes share their views and sometimes they're correct. But nonetheless, Jesus submitted to his mother and father and followed them home, and the results are interesting. Mary treasures these things. She had value in them. She considered them over and over in her heart. She ponders them. And, of course, Jesus increases. So in his submission, we then see that there's an increase in maturity and an increase in favor with both God and man. And it seems that that's a prayer, and I invite us to consider that in our own children. So around the group, talk about the role of correcting our children and seeing them submit to that correction as a means to then increasing in their knowledge, in their maturity, in their growth, in their favor with God and man. So that it's not discipline to keep someone down, say submit so that we keep you down, but it's submission so that then there's a maturity, there's an awareness, there's a growth, there's a positive impact. So talk about that. How does that happen? How does it work? How does submitting to God and our parents ultimately result in our growing and our maturation as a 12-year-old? Or as a 16-year-old or a 2-year-old? What's your experience as mothers and fathers or as children? Then as a second point of discussion, and if your time permits, pray with some intensity, is that there's an issue here of identity that is very much in view, that Throughout the entire story, Mary, the mother of Jesus, knows who this child is. She understands his identity. The angel reveals that he's the Son of God, going to be conceived in her and born. So she knows who this child is. And of course, in our natural birth process, we see the identity of the child physically, whether male or female. And then the identity, kind of who the child is. That's what I'm saying when I use the term identity. Who we are becomes a formation process. So children watch parents. Parents paint the room a certain color, decorate a certain way. They find out what the child enjoys, what they don't enjoy. And there's kind of an interplay with the parenting and the response to the child's behavior that results over time in who someone becomes. It's what the argument or the line of thinking from sociology would be, that's the natural or the nature of the environment and the nurture that happens in the environment. Of course, there's a big identity debate. To what extent are we formed, our identity formed just in our DNA? That the environment around us, the parenting and so forth, doesn't play as much. That's actually somewhat determined or ultimately determined just by the DNA. So if someone, for instance, says I'm transgender, or I'm homosexual, or I'm not a male anymore, now I'm a female, there's an argument in society today, a line of thinking that's saying that's all been predetermined. There's nothing you can do except support that person. They're just identifying with who they are in terms of their DNA. So of course this has a lot of implications in our world, and today is somewhat of a breaking news story in which the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has passed legislation to allow people of transgender to go into really the bathroom that they choose. So if someone is anatomically a male but identifies as being a female, they could go into a ladies' restroom. It's a question whether the governor will sign that bill and how that will move forward. And actually on the same day, I'm informed that the president and our executive branch of government for the nation is also pushing an executive order to demand that public schools, public education, would require transgender bathroom usage. So this is now at the forefront, and why I ask you to take some time and to pray. There's a lot of debate over whether this is a part of a discrimination line of thinking, but for me, it's as a pastor, as a minister of the gospel, this is about who children are and who we are as men and women. So two questions that you could discuss in conjunction with your prayer are: what role do mothers play in identity formation? And then secondly, at what age, or what's the appropriate age for children to take responsibility for their own identity formation? So 18 has long been the age of accountability for adulthood in the United States of America. Here in the Bible we see that Jesus was 12, and yet he still submitted to his parents, rather than argue that he could have submitted to his heavenly Father and said, I'm staying at the temple, I'm doing my thing my way. He submitted to his earthly parents at age 12. So those are two points of reference, but I encourage you to discuss respecting one another's views, not as much to come to a conclusion of unity, but to be aware that we may have varying views on when children come of age. But certainly my concern as a pastor is that if I have a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old, they are not of the age to determine whether they should be male or female. Their body and their mind have not yet matured to fully grasp and understand, and it is a mother's role in large part to instill that. And I'm very concerned and deeply troubled for our nation at this moment as we consider a huge shift in our sociology. And as Christians, we above all should pray, and then as God wills, speak into the world around us by truth, but always in love. So pray that love will fill our hearts, that we can help mothers, we can help children, that the Lord will use us. Well, God bless you. It's an important topic, and I thank you for taking it at that level. Have a good Connect group. God bless.